Hello! Today we will be discussing some basic do's and don'ts. Do suggest ideas to discussion threads and share what you think. Don't post one-liners that have no thought put into them or are just alt powers. Now what I mean by this is the point of the discussion threads, the point of the fandom is you want to talk, you want to discuss Worm, yeah? You want to put in ideas for fanfiction, you want to do all that good stuff. But some of the content isn't actually very constructive. This is what I mean by don't post one-liners, don't just put alt powers. And by that I don't mean you can't have alt powers, because those can be really interesting. But you have to have some thought besides Taylor as Mega Man or Taylor as Sonic. You have to have something much more nuanced that explores it, like Outside or any of the other really any of the Lara Croft Taylors. They all have this sense of wariness that Taylor has gone through something that's called PTSD. They've used the power and the experience to fundamentally change Taylor's character in a way that's very interesting, and I like that quite a lot. But yeah, like, even if it is just an idea though, a well thought out idea will get a lot of acclaim, as long as you can hopefully back it up with writing. If you can't, well then you can offer it to someone else to try, or you could just have a dig at it and see who wants it, really. There was an idea recently that was absolutely hilarious in my opinion, where essentially when Taylor's at the summer camp, something happens, something goes wrong, and it's an emergency. And for some reason, Taylor and the other scouts sort of group together and come together and have to fight off something. I think it's doing a wilderness exercise or something. I can't remember it too much. I'll probably link it below. But yeah, that happens. And then the police get called in. For some reason, there's a misunderstanding. The police get called in. And then there's a war. And it's just constantly escalating from that point on. It involves a Civil War reenactors, and all these people just going up and up and up, and through this Taylor is accidentally somehow becoming the general and slowly get some sense of what to do. And so the end goal of this is just that at the end of the summer camp, at the end of it all, there's just essentially this war going on behind the scenes between Taylor and whoever the hell else decided to piss her off, and there's always defectors coming to her side, and it's glorious. And somehow it resolves. And then from that point on, first of all, that is absolutely hilarious. Second of all, there are also a lot of repercussions for the rest of the story. Because from that point on, Taylor now has a network of people who respect her as a general. And that will really, really mess with the dynamic of the trio in everything, really. So yeah. That's still an idea only, unfortunately. Nobody's anyone actually posted anything, so I'm rather sad about that. But hopefully, at some point in the future, Applejohn will get back on it and something will happen. Fingers crossed. Do explore Taylor's characterization and that of others around her. Don't just pull a Taylor in name only. Now, what I mean by this is that, obviously, Taylor, further than just a character, is supposed to be, a person. And so people will change depending on stimuli and other things around them, and they'll adapt and do what they can to survive. So, for example, in canon, Taylor turns out starts off awkward and nerdy and all that, and just starts getting more and more fierce and brutal, and her fighting style becomes that of a rat stuck in a corner because she doesn't have the base power to beat it, and that's why she also does all the stuff people call munchkining. That's why she uses Gaspicin on bugs, because it gives her that little edge when she doesn't actually have that much to work with. And that would be true of any story. Taylor who has brute powers would not be the same kind of Taylor you understand. Taylor who does something else, who has Panacea's powers, will not be the same either. It's all, you have to show how the power and the situation which gave them the power impacts their character. Conversely, if you're not writing Taylor, same thing applies, Taylor's just the easy example. However, you should not pull a Taylor in name only, and what I mean by that is you should not just cut and paste whatever you want as a character and call it Taylor. There should be some reason, there should be some justification for how you've written her. And of course that justification may not be necessary for things like crack fix, but that is up to your own judgment and how you should deal with it. As a general rule, show the characterization, explore it. Do use characters and show how they grow throughout the narrative. Don't use them as a tabula rasa or just regurgitate fanon. Now, what I mean by this is, sort of ties into the last point. You should show how characters changed from the events of the narrative. You know, like people will change from stimulus and their situation. Yeah, so you should show that. Taylor should not be the same person she is at the end of the story as she is at the start. It doesn't matter how small it is. To paraphrase a quote, no man crosses the same river twice, because it is not the same man and it is not the same river. Probably screwed that up, but you get what I mean. Everything changes people. And by what I mean by tabula rasa sort of ties into the point above of Taylor in name only. They should not just be a blank slate. They should have something about them that makes them interesting, something that makes them human, that just doesn't make them a caricature. Do not regurgitate fanon. Armsmaster is not an antisocial dickwad to the point of being incompetent. He is a bit of an antisocial dickwad to some degree, but he's not socially inept, as many people would think. Sophia does not think of things in strictly predator and prey terms. Amy is not a person who's deserving of nothing but sympathy. Everything just... There are so many ways that people get typecast and just it sort of builds up and perpetuates itself that aren't conducive to a good story, and these are some of the ways, because you're misrepresenting the characters and exaggerating them. You're flanderizing the characters in a way that does not do them justice, really. Do write jokes and humorous fiction. Don't presume that randomness and absurdity will by themselves account for comedy. Now, what I mean by this is, go for it. Jokes. I don't care what kind of jokes, if it's dead baby jokes, if it's puns, if it's just satire, sarcasm, whatever the hell you want to write, the style you want to write it, do it. Go for it. The only thing I really do not like is the assumption that having random things that happen in hilarious, or not even hilarious, random things that are happening in absurd ways will by itself be funny. It isn't necessarily funny, it's just a non sequitur. Of course, not saying that it can't be funny. Definitely well done absurdity and random humor and surrealism is amazing, but a lot of the times people just think that that can sort of account for the fact that they don't have a well thought out punchline. And they see it as a way out of writing shit comedy that's still funny, and I don't like that. And often it just becomes this chain of, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and it doesn't actually contribute anything to the story at all. Do write interesting interpretations of characters and the setting as a whole. Don't write things off with fanon. Now, what I mean by this is you should write interesting things. Maybe you think that Sophia is the way she is because of troubles at home. Maybe you think the reason Clockblocker triggered is because of the fact that he felt like he was powerless over the fact he didn't have time with his family. Maybe you think that Danny is a broken individual after Annette's death, and then he tries, but he just doesn't have the energy and is just completely depressed from that point out, and that's why he acts the way he does in canon. That is fine. Maybe you think Brockton Bay is specifically in this one area or that one area, even though it's not really specified. That's fine. That's fine. Just don't think that Sophia is an asshole because she is mentally fucked in the head from having a shot. Do not think that Danny is just hopeless. Do not think things are the way they are because they are the way they are. And this does once again tie into my previous point because I really do not like fanon in a lot of these situations. Do have a good appreciation for the original and sneak in things that show you the depth of your work. Don't stick to the stations of canon like it's a right-by-numbers scenario. It's always good to understand and appreciate Worm, or the canon of whatever the hell you're writing for if you apply this to other pieces of fiction. Sneaking in things that show the depth of your work. I mean that, like, maybe it's an offhand comment, maybe something goes on, maybe it's a coincidence, maybe in the background you see just a little hint for the people who have a very deep understanding and knowledge of the original. For example, a character's name is Noel Meinhardt, and most people wouldn't understand why that's important. But then some people would understand why that could have implications down the road. Maybe it's Sierra, maybe it's Forrest, maybe it's just these small characters that normally would not be brought up again, being used in a very constructive manner in this fan work, and that's really nice. But when I say stations of canon, if you don't know what that means, it's sort of like a case of, oh, every fic has to do X, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, etc., etc. So for Worm, that would be the locker, power testing. Even though ironically neither of them are in canon, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. The lung fight, or I should say long fight, considering origins of that word. Canary going to the bird cage, Slaughterhouse 9, stuff like that. It just has to follow the tracks that canon has set. And the problem with that is that it's very limiting. And I'm not saying it's bad to do that, because by itself there is no good and bad in it. It's just a tool to help you write. But it can be limiting, and if it doesn't help you with what you want to do, then you should get rid of it. If it helps you have an idea of what you want to write, helps you sort of figure out what you want to say, that's good. But don't stick to it rigidly. Just use it as a guideline and have a sort of idea of, wait, if this happens, then Leviathan would happen, or it would happen, or the Slaughterhouse 9 would come earlier or later, or Scion would be triggered early. Something would happen, yeah? Something would happen. Something would diverge because of the way the story is different to canon, and that is a very powerful thing, and is a very thoughtful thing to include if you can. Do write for different situations, i.e. street level or Golden Morning or something like that. Don't presume you have to do all of them. By this I mean, like, some people will want their story to stick street level, some people will want their story to stick at, like, escalate quickly and then go straight to apocalypse. I think it's best to have a mix of it. Now, of course, this is rather contentious in my opinion, because you can write a really good piece of fiction at either end and just keep it there and just stick it there and don't do anything else with it. Certainly, but I think if you want to grow as a writer, it's best to try everything. Try a bit of it. Do something street level. Do something apocalypse. Do something with the Slaughterhouse 9. Do something in all these situations that will give you breadth and variety of experience as a writer. On the other hand, don't do all of them, because then you start shoehorning things in that aren't appropriate to what you're trying to say and what you're trying to convey with your story. And then that just sort of makes it a mishmash and dilutes the message and makes it sort of fall apart a bit. Also, that's a critique that can be applied to following the stations of canon. So yeah, that's partly why I say that. Do have interesting powers and or interpretations of powers. Don't get caught up in numbers and fan wank. So what I mean by this is, it's always good to have an interesting concept. It's always good to have an interesting power. It's always good to have an interesting way of thinking about someone's power. That's all amazing. That's always really good. But you shouldn't think in numbers. You should not think in, oh, they will be able to do exactly this much lifting. Oh, they will be able to do exactly this much power. They have this much in their swarm. They have this much. They are this powerful. They can beat this person easily. It's not conducive to a story. In no way is it conducive to story. And this is Worm specific really, but don't rely on the PRT as threat ratings. Those are specifically for the response team and how easy they would be to subdue. There is no categorical scale of any powers in that assessment, really. It's just 12 categories with how you should deal with them. Don't go near a striker, because when they touch you, something bad's going to happen. Assume the worst for trumps, because they might be able to screw with whatever cape is fighting them. Do not attack a tinker in the lab, because that's where their shit is, but if you separate them from it, it'll probably mean they're much less of a threat. Movers will be able to get places quickly, stuff like that. It's just, they're ways for people to fight them, to counter them. It's not a way to describe how powerful they are. And I also have to bring up the very quoted thing said by Stan Lee. Who would win in a fight? Whoever the hell the writer wants to win in a fight. It comes down to your writing on how believable that fight is. Not the powers, not the people, the writing. That said, there is also a phenomena now and then that for Endbringer fights, you roll dice to truly accentuate how random the results are. And I think that's a beautifully elegant way to show how chaotic, like, apocalypse level scenarios and disasters can be. And while there's arguments for and against that based on author fiat, how good it is, stuff like that, I think that it's a good thing overall. It's a tool. But like every other tool you have, you should know when to use it and how to use it, and not to misuse it. And that's all for this week. I guess I'll see you guys next time.